So as promised this week, we're going to speak about husbands and wives, and as a couple, we're going to share the giving. We're going to do half each as we go. So I'll read the passage first of all, and I'm reading it. Oh, sorry, children, if you want to go out. Alison's going anyway. If you can be turning to 1 Peter chapter 3, the rest of us. So I'm reading in a slightly freer version this morning. 1 Peter 3, 1-7. In the same way, let me say a word to the women. You should be subject to your husbands, so that if there should be some who disobey the word, they may be won without a word through the behavior of their wives, as they notice you conducting yourself with reverence and purity. The beauty you should strive for, not to be the external sort, elaborate hairdressing, gold trinkets, fine clothes. Rather, true beauty is the secret beauty of the heart, of a sincere, gentle and quiet spirit. This is very precious to God, and that's how the holy women of old who hoped in God used to make themselves beautiful in submission to their husbands. Take Sarah, for instance, who obeyed Abraham and called him master. You are her children if you do good and have no fear of intimidation. You men, in the same way, think out how to live with your wives. Yes, they're physically weaker than you, but they deserve full respect. They are heirs of the grace of life, just the same as you. That way, nothing will obstruct your prayers. So last week, we began to consider Peter's practical advice about what it is to live as a Christian in a pagan world. And he said that we're like foreigners here, but we have to obey the laws of the land, even though we are foreigners. And I gave the example of when I go to India, I have to obey the laws of India, even though I'm a British citizen. And that means respecting government and working hard for our employers. But now he turns to the relationship between husbands and wives. Now, in the writings of the ancient world, there were a number of household codes, and that's what Peter is really giving here, is a code, a way to live as families and as society. And people like Aristotle wrote such household codes. And they comprised advice to men concerning the management of their wives, their children, their slaves. And it was thought that the order in a household would produce order in society. And we see in both Peter's and Paul's writings a version of the household codes, which, as we shall see, are radically different from other such writings. In order to understand this passage properly, we need to consider the culture into which Peter was writing, the Greco-Roman world, so that we can see how different what Peter is saying is compared to other writers. So within the Greco-Roman world, women were considered as lesser beings. Think about that for a moment. They were considered to be lesser beings by the Greeks and by the Romans. Plato and Aristotle both viewed males and females as discrete and separate types of beings. Heraclitus suggested males and females were polar opposites. Pythagoras, him of the theorem, Pythagoras' theorem, anyone repeat it back to me? Hypotenuse is equal to the sum of the squares on the other two sides. Well, he also wrote some philosophy as well. And he described male and female characteristics as follows. Male, female, culture, nurture, straight, curved, reason, intuition, public, private, humanity, animality, production, reproduction, subject, object, self, other, odd, even, probably agree with that, most of us, most men are odd, universal, particular, mind, body, civilized, primitive, good, bad, master, slave. So the next time you do Pythagoras' theorem, think about all of those things. And a cursory look at this list tells us that to be female in the Greek world was to be derivative and subordinate to males. And that was certainly how Aristotle saw the world, with his notion of the female as a misbegotten male. In other words, something had gone wrong in the womb and produced a female, was the way Aristotle saw it. He'd be popular amongst today's culture, wouldn't he? And so whilst Paul championed the equality of both genders, the early church, in order not to cause offence and bring the gospel into disrepute, reinforced the household codes that were to be found in the writings of Greek philosophers, although with a distinctly Christian slant. Essentially, within marriage, men would take responsibility for all the external affairs of the household, whereas women would be responsible for the domestic affairs, the household budget, the cooking, the washing, the rearing of children, and looking after the slaves, etc. And there was no opportunity for a woman to have a career or to hold office or any power outside the household, unless, like Livia, a famous woman, you married the emperor, Augustus in her case, and it said that she controlled the empire through her husband. The really radical bit in the passage we've just read is verse 7, where Peter instructs husbands to be considerate and caring towards their wives because they are equal recipients of the gift of life. And this affirmation of the equality of men and women before God was totally against the culture of the day. Also, the instructions about women submitting in verse 1 are in the context of seeing the unbelieving husband saved. In other words, he's telling them that although they are now free in Christ, within the cultural context, they shouldn't do anything that will keep their husbands from faith, but act in a way that was in keeping with the society, so that would encourage their husbands on a journey towards faith. So that's the background of what Peter's saying. I'm now going to hand over to Carolyn.
Well, that was quite a list, wasn't it? When I read his notes, he gave me his notes and he said, right, this is my introduction, this is how I'm going to sort of, put the foundation out there. And I read that list and I'm like, oh, really? Well, I won't be repeating any of those. Submission. It's a word that can be received negatively and slightly jar against our controlling nature, submission. However, it's a virtue that we should all pursue because Peter includes it in all of the relationships that we're looking at in these passages. So last week Richard spoke about obeying and submitting to the authorities that we have, the parliament, the police, blah, blah. And next week we're going to look at submitting to each other as a church and how we serve each other in that commitment of submission. So coming from a brethren background, there's a lot I could focus on relating to submission. Only 3 points I want to bring out. I'm not going to dwell on them, but the women are required to wear hats as a sign of submission. And the hats being, well, as I remember, as I was only merely, 6 to 12, as I remember, when I was in there. So the hats were flamboyant colours. They had amazing fruit on. They had flowers loomed round the rims. It was it was almost like an Easter bonnet parade every Sunday. In my eyes, it was an Easter bonnet parade. The requirement of women to wear dresses. So no trousers, okay? So when me and my sister said, please could we go to a different church? And they said, yes, that's fine, as long as it's a church we don't mind, which was very good of them. Because we wore trousers, we would roll up our trousers and make sure you couldn't see them below our long coats and leg it past the gospel hall because someone would be standing outside, one of the elders would be standing outside trying to bring people in, but also note that we were going off for our lift, our transport to the thing. So we would leg it past and hope our trousers didn't unravel as we were running past, lest they should tell our mum and dad that we were wearing trousers on a Sunday. or the women not being permitted to share scripture, hymns or thought in the Sunday service. And that they were, as they were required to be silent throughout the meeting. It's no wonder I left at 10. Now, these things remain in the denomination, and I'm not criticising that. I really am not, because actually I feel blessed about being in the Brethren Church because of the roots are so strong in the Word. They are absolutely solid. And I really thank God for that start in my Christian life. And my recall of hats and trousers are just fond memories. I do laugh at it when I think about Auntie Pam's hats. They are absolutely incredible. However, what saddens me is the last one, where the women are in silence and they're not able to share. 1 Corinthians 14:26 says, "What shall we say then, brothers and sisters? When you come together, each of you has a hymn or a word or an instruction, a revelation, a tongue, an interpretation. Everything must be done so the church is built up." It doesn't single out, but if you're a woman, you can't do that. So we can come in freedom and give to the church. And hopefully all here know that we have the freedom to bring these things to the meeting, every morning meeting. However, to avoid confusion and within the church, there has to be order. So please don't stay silent, but speak to the person leading the service so that what you have to share can be considered, and it can be looked at, the flow of the meeting. So it can be included, but at the appropriate time. So please don't stay silent. If you feel you've got something, come and speak to us. Another aspect I'm not going to judge is who wears the trousers. That's the saying, isn't it? Oh, we all know who wears the trousers in that relationship. I'm not going there. I will look at respect. And lastly, I'm not going to look at disparaging the role of the mother and housewife that we've now changed to the word homemaker. And I do think that's because of this, maybe the slight stigmatism to being called a housewife. Oh, I'm married to the house. So now we've changed it to homemaker. For 10 years, I had the absolute pleasure of nurturing my children for this world. And I do call it an absolute pleasure, because not many women have that now. Not many men have that choice either. So before choosing to return back to paid employment, and for those of you that know me, I love organising, creating, and during this time, I served the church. Although the children were very young, there were 4 children, very close in age, I was busy. I was really busy. But actually, once they'd gone to school, I had time. So I invested that into the church. Housework for me was given whilst the children went to school, and Richard brought the money in. Yes, I did the cooking, the cleaning, the shopping, the mending, and the majority of the caring for the children. And it has to be said, I did not consider them a miserable chore. I enjoyed that period in my life. However, it wasn't this way because I was a wife. It was this way because Richard earned more than me, as I was only a pupil nurse and not bringing in many coppers. I cared for the house. I cared for the children because I had time to do it. Meaning when the evening and the weekend came, we could enjoy family together. So can I just say, it wasn't because I was a wife that we chose that. It was logical, and it fitted with how we ran things. So, what am I going to talk about? Sounded like a politician. I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that. Now we're going to talk about things. So beauty, through the eyes of, through the ages, women have adorned their hair, as we heard in Scripture. They adorned their hair with combs, with jewels, to make them beautiful. And as women, we are made to feel concerned about our appearance, starting from toddler age. How do you look? Let me do your hair. Oh, you look beautiful. Yes, they do. And of course you want to say that to your children. We said that to our children. You're beautiful. You look so lovely. But from a very young age we do that. And I'm not here to state how much time women should spend on how they look and everything else. That's not what this passage is about. But we should look at our inner being, our inner beauty. So verses 3 to 5, I just want to reread those. It says, your beauty should not come from outward adornment, such as braided hair or wearing of gold jewelry and fine clothes. Instead, it should be that of your inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight. And often the gentle and quiet spirit is known motherhood, a gentle and quiet spirit. When a mother first has the child, she is just there. She is just in an amazing place, a gentle and quiet spirit. Maybe not before the child is born, can I just add? For this is the way the holy women of the past who put their hope in God used to make themselves beautiful. They were submissive to their own husbands. And then they go on about Sarah. The deepest root of Christian womanhood is mentioned in these verses. It's the hope in God. Holy women who hoped in God made themselves beautiful. These women did not need to put their hope in their husband or getting a husband. She does not need to put her hope in her looks. She puts her hope in the promises of God. She is described in Proverbs 31:25. Strength and dignity are her clothing. And she laughs at the time to come. She laughs at everything in the everything that the future will bring and might bring, because her hope is in God. A woman needs to have courage. She needs to use words responsibly, to speak with respect even when disagreeing with her husband, to speak the truth in love. Ephesians 4:15 tells us to do that. To bind mercy and truth around her neck so that she will find favour and high esteem in the sight of God and man. Now, I'm not going to say that's easy. I am not going to say that's easy. To just, speak the truth in love, to hold back that frustration that sometimes you have got yourself into because you feel maybe that you're losing control. Or maybe that's just me. So let's consider Peter's instruction for wives to be submissive to their husband, including the husbands who are unbelieving, by focusing on verse 5, which says, this is how the holy women who hoped in God used to adorn themselves by submitting to their husbands. I consider marriage to be about shared values, about shared beliefs, and an outlook on life. By wanting the same things, you grow towards each other. I have had to learn to appreciate football and rugby. I've yet to find out what Richard has found. I'm sure there's something. Sorry, dear. Respect. But I've learned to appreciate those things because I knew then I would not be able to enter some of his world if I just kept going out thinking, oh no, it's another football game. And Man U are going to lose yet again because their manager might need changing. Oh, sorry, we're online. Sorry. But I found interest, and actually I now really do enjoy a game of football and rugby on the television. I do. I wouldn't say I turn it on, but if it's on, I am slightly glued to it. So it's about those sharing of values and beliefs. wanting to do the same things. You grow towards each other. This is hard when there's an unbelieving husband in the mix. You have a lot in common, but if there is one that loves the Lord and wants to serve him, and the other may become resentful towards the time and the commitment that entails. And in verse 1 we read, "Wives, in the same way, be submissive to your husbands, so that if any of them do not believe the word, they may be run over without talk by the behaviour of our wives." Take care that reminders and prompting, little drip feeding, isn't causing barriers. Let your actions speak louder than your words, and leave the rest to God. Proverbs 19, these are two proverbs that my father used to regularly give us, it being in a family of 4 females, bless him. Proverbs 19:13, "A quarrelsome life is like a constant dripping of a leaky roof. And it is better to live in the corner of a housetop than in a house shared with a quarrelsome wife." I rest my case on that one. Saying that, I just want to note there that actually nagging can also come from husbands too. And as parents, we can nag. So please receive those verses not just as a quarrelsome wife, but actually maybe as husbands and as parents. Do we nag our children? Let's just step back from the nagging. Oh, does he, Harriet? Do they? No. Yeah, oh, they do. Okay. Prayer is always available at the back, should you need it, David. So saying that, I just want to note that, yeah, obviously, men nag too, parents nag too, so it's not just a jive at women. Having a spouse who once was accepting of your faith that has now become cold is very hard. Or someone who had a faith and has turned their back on God is such a difficult situation to be in. And I ask that as a church, we come alongside those people in the situation and pray for barriers to be removed and opportunities arise and to be taken, and allow God to change even the hardest of hearts. So if you are in that situation, come alongside somebody and say, will you pray with me in this situation? Will you pray for my partner? I just need him to be with me on my journey with God. So as women, we may feel concerned about our appearance from a young age. I would suggest that men are taught strategies to hide their emotions, by which they were labelled unmanly. Big boys don't cry. Man up. What are you, a man or a mouse? So hurtful, so cutting. Hobbies and goals are healthy, but when it becomes a preoccupation, it's not so healthy. So they jump into their work, money, position, sport, online gaming, and the television, or they just become plain passive. It becomes ways in which men learn to hide real issues in their lives, and often from the people closest to them. In this instance, a wife may be desperate to know her husband on a deeper level. She needs to know that she understands the person that she shares her life with, whilst knowing that she is understood too and cared about in a deeper level than the preoccupations that may be there. Dwelling in these preoccupations can enable a man to hide away from his wife, from his family, from even God. And Proverbs 27:19 reads, "As water reflects the face, so one's life reflects the heart. The heart is the deepest place of absolute truth, where there are no masks, and the place where the real person is." God's purpose for the wife is to install trust in her husband that will allow him to open up about those failures and the wounds of the past so that healing can take place. If the husband resists her efforts to share in this way, seeking to control his wife, she may become intimidated and to seek to retaliate. She may retreat into self-protection and become silent, or self-defensive and explode with anger. If this happens, her ability to speak the truth in love and bringing life and restoration can be turned into ridicule and disrespect and even pity for him. It is here the statement, "Who wears the trousers?" comes into play. We are all called to respect and build upon each other's uniqueness. And this is about friendships as well. In the words of Josh Widdicombe, in his recent showing of Who Do You Think You Are, which is pretty good if you haven't seen it, we are all the same, just different. And to finish my words, let's celebrate and thank God for that difference.
I just want to finish with a final thought. We know from Genesis, the curse upon the sexes, that woman would have a desire for her husband and the husband would rule over her. But in the Song of Songs, we have instructions between men and women, and the Shulamite woman concludes like this: "I am my beloved's, and his desire is for me." Much of the poetry within Song of Songs takes place within a garden, and I believe what God is saying is this: that where a husband and wife live in harmony with one another, it reverses the curse of the fall, and we return to the garden through our love, through our honouring and mutual respect of one another and of God. Revelation ends in a garden, restored. Perhaps a good marriage and a good relationship with husband and wife is the closest we can get to that garden, this side of the grave. Amen.